Today we're going to be talking about being changed by Jesus some more. And the redemption and transformation of our lives totally hangs on the person of Jesus. What we believe about Jesus Christ is going to be the one factor that decides whether we are going to be transformed or whether we're going to actually experience that transformation in our actual lives. Not just an inner transformation, but an actual transformation that was so evident in the early church and throughout different parts of history. The Christians were radically different than the culture around them. And we're in an age where we're blending in. We're in an age right now where in times past, God would have sent a prophet to say, you are becoming the culture you're in. You are not standing out and being a light and being separate and being called out people. You are blending into the culture. Yeah. And that redemption is not going to happen unless you believe some certain things about Jesus.
What is so profound about what you're saying, Jim, in this is that you're not just talking about us being changed, but you're talking about lasting change. We're not going to have faith in something that just gives us a new list that we can kind of attempt for a while and then get tired and go back to the way we were. The word you're using, transformation, is exactly what the scripture talks about, like a butterfly, like a moth, or a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. So it's sustained change because it is really authentic change.
Right, and that transformation, that pathway back to life, is what people really want. It's what makes the good news good. Right. People want a change. They want new life. And Jesus, remember, like we talked about before, is that way back to life. The tree of life in the Garden of Eden that we're blocked from. Yeah. The kingdom of heaven is now available for people like you and me, amazingly enough, to enter in to this new life and return back to that kind of life. Yeah. And it should be the kind of life that even though we're mysterious, complex, distorted, God can take those different areas of our lives and redeem them back to the original, restore them the way they were supposed to be.
Yeah, and I just love what you're saying, because the gospel's not a pitch. I sat in a group Monday night, small group, and two of the people were exchanging in the group about, even in the last year, they knew each other before they had come to Christ. They came to Christ and ended up in the same small group, and both of them were commenting back to each other about, you are a completely different person than you were when I knew you even 2 years ago. That's what you're talking about, which is possible, it's available, it's actually normal if we trust in the real Jesus.
And that's what we need to talk about today, is in what ways, because there's a practical part to that, and exactly what am I supposed to believe about Jesus that would lead to this kind of change? Because obviously lots of people believe in Jesus and believe in Jesus and they're not changed. You know, the demons believe, but they're not changed. They have not bowed their knee, they have not surrendered. Yeah. And there's a difference between the easy believe and faith that leads to a trust, that leads to a transformation of our life and our character. And that kind of change that's promised, you know, one of the things that we're going to have to believe about Jesus is that what he did on the cross accomplished something. And for me to believe that, I have to believe Jesus is my new high priest. Yeah. Jesus is my new high priest. He is seated at the right hand of God. Now, he is my high priest.
I love this part. Can I back you up just a second for it? Because the high priest thing is so profound. I want to back you up just a second. You said something really good about people that they believe Jesus, but they're not being transformed, as opposed to really believing Jesus. But really, isn't it true what you're actually saying is that we mistake understanding Jesus for actually believing in Jesus? Does that make sense in our culture?
Absolutely, absolutely. It'd be like the difference between my son believing I'm his dad and him obeying me as his son. Yeah. They're two different things.
Yeah. He can understand the whole family structure, but to believe you're his father and an authority in his life,
Right.
is a whole different thing. Anyway.
When I tell him to go get in the car and put on his seatbelt,
Right.
And he doesn't do that,
Right.
he believes in seatbelts.
Yeah.
He believes I'm his dad,
Yeah.
but he did not do what I asked him to do.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus actually says at the end of his Sermon
Yep.
on the Mount. As you follow through the whole sermon, he ends with the house on the rock or on the sand.
Right.
Whoever hears my teachings and obeys them is like a person that built their house on a rock.
Yeah.
And the whole sermon is summed up with obedience, and obedience comes from trust, and trust comes from knowing a person.
Yeah.
And knowing a person, as you get to know them, these are just 3 ways you can get to know Jesus, but there's 1,000.
But they're very clear biblical aspects of who Jesus is if we
Right.
believe in him accurately. Yeah. And the first one is priest.
Yeah, believing that Jesus is my high priest means that when he said, "It is finished," on the cross, my sin is no longer hanging around my neck.
Yeah.
I am no longer, like Paul said, a slave to sin and death. I've been set free.
Yeah.
And the problem is that I sometimes fumble. I sometimes fail. I sin. And Paul talks about that dynamic. He says, so I have been set free from this law of sin and death.
Yeah.
But there's these 2 laws at work. The one law, which is righteousness, and then there's this other law of sin.
Yeah.
And both of these things are going on at the same time.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people come up to that paradox and go, I guess I'm not going to change.
I'm stuck.
I give up.
Yeah.
But that's not what Paul says. Paul says, when I sin, that is not I who sin, but it is sin living in me that does it.
Yeah.
He separates his identity from his sin.
Yes.
And the reason why he can do that is because the blood of the perfect Lamb, Jesus, has covered over those sins.
Yes.
And he believes in his new identity, which is saved
And has not
and
just
pure.
and has not just granted him that identity, but is actually, out of Jesus' own mouth, has rebirthed him with a new identity.
And always Paul, when he talks about this paradox, he always goes on to describe the kind of person that we should look like.
Yeah.
This radical people that look new and have love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness. Don't be deceived and think that you can continue to be an idol worshiper and sexually deviant and a swindler and have any part to do with the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
You should look different.
Yeah.
And that is the normal expectation.
Yeah.
And Paul makes that clear while at the same time acknowledging this continuing issue of sin.
And see what you're saying, it's encapsulated in the idea of him being our priest, because there's only one high priest. It's Jesus Christ. And if we're still dabbling in these other things, we have many priests. We have many priests that we're going to for whatever it is, absolution or of some type. But to believe in Jesus accurately is to believe that he is the Son of God who atoned for my sin with his own blood. No more sheep, no more goats. His own blood. That's what it says in Hebrews. By his own blood he has entered in as our high priest. A high priest, though, who fully understands our struggle.
Absolutely.
But also offers us a new life, a transformed life, a transforming life.
And it's normal to try really hard to be good.
Yeah.
It's normal as you begin in your walk with Jesus to try really hard to be good.
Yeah.
And there will be times when you don't want to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But if you really look, the deeper desire in your heart, the saved heart, your deeper longing is to follow God.
Yeah.
Paul talks about that. And he says, what I want to do, I don't do.
Yeah.
What does he want to do? He wants to do the right thing.
Yeah.
What he doesn't want to do, he does.
Yeah.
What's his deepest desire?
Yeah.
To not do the thing
Yeah.
that's sin.
Yeah.
So we get this picture of there is a deep heart transformation that has happened.
Yeah.
You have been clothed with Christ.
Yeah.
The old you's gone. The new you's come.
And in your heart there is a longing. That's what Romans 8 says. There's a longing in your heart that's crying out to God as your Father, but not as your governor, not as your official, but he says Abba, as your dad. that rebirth produces that.
And why would we start? I mean, think about this. Why would we start with our identity? Because this doesn't make any sense to Americans.
Right.
I mean, if you walk up to somebody, you don't say, "This is who I am."
Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah.
We say, "What do you do?"
Yeah.
The first thing out of our mouth is, "Hi, this is my name. What do you do?"
Yeah.
Our name, we're all about doing.
Our accomplishments. Yeah. Our name, our position.
What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? We're all do.
Yeah.
We are the most doing culture ever.
Yeah.
We are so focused on what we accomplish that it doesn't make sense to us to begin with our identity.
Yeah.
Whereas many cultures do. They would begin with who they are, who their family is.
Yeah, their lineage.
And it changes how you live, what you believe about what you are.
Yeah.
And Jesus knew that.
Yeah.
Paul was almost more like a psychologist than a theologian, because he knew how we worked, how we inner work. And he knew that when we wake up in the morning, part of knowing Jesus is going to be, I need to wake up in the morning and believe that his death on the cross has set me free from sin and death. Just like the Jews when they were crossed through the Red Sea, when God parted the Red Sea and they crossed through and they got to the other side and the water came crushing down, they celebrated because they were not slaves anymore. But there's this in-between time where they're wandering around in the desert and the Jordan River's sitting there, and all they have to do is cross over the Jordan and take the land that was promised. And it's the exact same thing. There are many Christians that are wandering around in the desert of the Christian life, and they haven't believed enough, trusted enough to walk across that river and take the high places and take the land that God says he's going to take. And that is different. And that's what they're commended for. And Abraham and Jacob and Isaac is their faith.
Is their faith.
That's the faith that saves us.
Yeah. And like you said, it begins with, and that's, Peter tells us that, it begins with him as our high priest. That really is the starting point.
Yeah, if I don't believe he accomplished anything on the cross, and that he is not setting me free, and that I have to basically set myself free, then I'm going to be constantly wanting to go back to Egypt, just like they were in the desert. I wish I could go back and be a slave again so we could eat the food that was available to us as slaves.
If I don't believe that when he said on the cross, it is finished, if I think that he said, in the future, you'll get a reward, if that's what I think he said, as opposed to, no, it is finished, the work is finished. I have, Romans 8:1, there is therefore now in Christ, there's no condemnation. That's him as our priest.
For those who are in Christ Jesus.
We're in Christ Jesus. So what's the second aspect of him? We're looking at at priest. He's our high priest. What else?
Well, Jesus is our prophet, and there's a lot of ways that he's a prophet. He knows what's going to happen. He talks about his death before he dies. He knew what was going to happen. The good thing about Jesus being our prophet is that he shows us things that we don't want to see. See, nobody likes prophets. Everybody wants to kill a prophet. Sometimes my wife is a prophet, and she tells me things I don't want to hear. And it kind of rears up a thing inside of me, which is my old man, right? And then I look at that and I say, am I going to listen to my wife who's being a prophet right now? She's telling me something I don't want to hear, or am I going to shut it down? Am I going to kill it? Well, the same dynamic happens in my relationship with Jesus. As I read the Gospels, I'm going to run into things that he says and did that I don't want to believe or do. And when you run into those things, the most common thing for people to do is go, well, I'm sure that has something to do with something that I don't understand, and move on. Yeah,
this is too much. There's some parts of the Bible that are just too deep or too mystical, or but here's what's so important. Jesus. What you said about prophet. Jesus as prophet then speaks into, what does a prophet do? He tells people things that they kind of know anyway, but they don't want to hear. And then sometimes he tells us things that we are completely oblivious to. We are blind to. There were times when the prophets of the Old Testament spoke into the culture, and there were people that it was revelatory to them. You're like, really? That's wrong? So both of those. Sometimes he tells us stuff that we already kind of know, and we've chosen to ignore or explain away. And then there's other times where he's actually speaking into our legitimate blind spot. We did not know we were doing that. We did not know that this was causing this effect.
Well, and it's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this is exciting.
Yeah.
Because if you believe that when you go into the Gospels, you're going to find things that you need to know that you can't see that are happening in your everyday life. I mean, things like parenting and grocery store and budget and what car, work ethic,
everything.
Problems with your boss. I mean, normal things that you deal with every day. Jesus speaks to those as the perfect teacher.
Yeah.
And he says things so true that they shake you.
Yeah.
And when you run into them, you're not going to understand things that he said, and you're going to want to discard them, or you're going to want to say, well, you're going to want to take that idea that he's saying and blend it in with what you already believe about him and develop your own personal Jesus, instead of letting him be the shocking, radical Jesus that he really was. And that is the only is the real Jesus that changes our lives.
Right.
And we all have blind spots.
At this point, I think it goes back to your original question, though, is who do you believe that Jesus is? When we come to those parts of the gospel, specifically the gospel, but of course all of Scripture, but when we come to the gospel and we happen upon, I mean, you and I were sharing this morning about some things we were discovering again, even this week in our time, with the Lord. When we come to those things, it really does test who do you really believe he is. Because if I come to those things and I think he's some mystic, some guru, some hooded nomad out in the Palestinian desert,
Obi-Wan
Kenobi, speaking in riddles and parables and fortune cookies, well then, I can say, well, I don't understand that, or it doesn't really apply, or Jesus always has a meaning, but I don't, and then I can push him away. But if I've started with believing that he is my high priest, see, my high priest knows my sin. He knows my context. This high priest even knows my attitudes and motives and forgives me, cleanses me. And now, as the prophet, he speaks to me personally, not blanketly, not rhetorically. He speaks to me personally because he is alive. We don't have the writings of a dead prophet.
And that's important because the picture of Jesus is the resurrected, alive Jesus. We have a picture of Jesus as the cross Jesus, the transactional Jesus. And we want to keep coming back to the cross, the cross, the cross. And unfortunately, what people have done is taken every single thing that Jesus ever said and have squished it into one thing.
Yeah.
And so whenever you say, well, I don't know what that means, I know what it probably means is that I'm a sinner and Jesus died on the cross for my sins and so I'm saved, because I don't understand what he means.
Yeah.
But what that does is it limits all of what Jesus taught and did. And he said, I have finished what I was sent here to do before he died on the cross.
Right, before he had atoned for our sins, he said, I finished the work you gave me.
Right, so everything he taught about discipleship, everything he modeled for us about what we're supposed to do with other people, all of the things that he taught about our inner heart and the transformation of our character and our actions and our efforts, all of it gets boiled down to one thing. And then Jesus doesn't get to say anything else.
Right.
And that's not Jesus. And I don't know what he will say to you, because he says different things to me, because I'm totally shattered differently than you are.
Yeah.
But I will guarantee that it will be shocking.
Yeah.
And it will be
accurate.
Joy.
It'll be joyful too. It'll be accurate, but it'll produce joy.
Yeah, everything I trade in for what he believes, for what I believe, has been a treasure.
Yeah.
I never want it back.
I think when you say that though, Jim, it's so important to realize then, and you've heard it, and I've said it, we've all, but where people go, I think I've read this passage 1,000 times, but I never saw X. That's the real Jesus.
That's Jesus' prophet.
That's Jesus' prophet.
And sometimes you'll look at that and say, well, that's not what that says, either because you don't want to hear it, right? Or because
I'm scrambling to figure out some way to explain it away.
How do I get away from this idea that's like staring me in the face, and I don't know what to do with it? And especially when we run into something that we don't understand about Jesus, especially in the Gospels, we need to stop and don't move forward until we do.
Because the temptation is just keep rolling.
Right.
Just keep rolling. Like you're on a tour.
People talk to me about how they read their Bibles, and they say, it's a kind of a miserable, depressing thing to do. And honestly, for me, for years, reading my Bible was just a really miserable task, because I didn't know that I had a living, risen Jesus that wanted to speak into my life and help me.
Yeah.
I didn't know that he was a teacher that would actually show me what I need to know for that day.
Yeah.
So, of course, the Word of God became very small,
Right.
and it just became concepts.
Yeah.
And that's dry. That's like
Ideas.
eating manna in the desert the
Yeah.
same time every day, the same tasting food.
Yeah.
And just over the river there is these grapes so big you can barely carry them.
Yeah.
That's the picture of the spiritual life. That available to us now is this whole new conquered kingdom.
And that's the challenge between faith and just knowledge. Because if we keep building understanding, but we're really not allowing it to speak as a prophet into our life, we're not building faith.
Right.
And what you're talking about, though, is very tangible interactions with Christ that will transform us. It's not the people that pull the mystic card frustrate me because they really make spiritual growth out of the reach for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
But
it seems too complicated.
yeah, well, and you might as well be Obi-Wan Kenobi again, right?
Right.
That's not the real Jesus. The real Jesus came down and spoke in a vernacular that people could understand, used stories that were right out of their culture. He wasn't trying to be confusing or mystical. However, the people who, like you just said, the people who listened to what he said, didn't really want, and kind of moved on. It's like when I always think of the parable of the soils. It says he gave this parable of the soils. There was a lot of people there listening that day. Well, a lot of them went, what's he talking about? I don't really know. You know, I hope we get to eat again. I mean, that's kind of was their response. Let's keep moving, see what comes next. But there was a select group that came to him specifically and said, what did you mean? I mean, we have some ideas here, but what did you mean by that? And those are the people, because they stopped instead of just moving on, that he took the time to explain it even more clearly.
Right.
And help them see applications that begin to change the way that they did ministry, that they did life.
And I feel the same way in a lot of my friendships, you know, in my relationships. I feel like sometimes people are really struggling, but they won't ask me. They're not curious. They don't want to know an answer. Maybe I even have an answer,
Yeah.
but I'm kind of waiting
Yeah.
because I might even give it and they're not listening.
Yeah.
They don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And we experience that all the time. You've experienced it, and
Yeah.
Jesus is experiencing that very same dynamic with us and with you.
Yeah.
You know, is as you come to him, he has all this treasure for us,
Yeah.
and we're not listening.
Yeah.
That's Jesus as prophet, and the next one's Jesus as king. And there's a lot of things about Jesus as king. And what usually gets emphasized is lordship, and I think lordship is very important because he's the king and he has all the authority. But something I want to emphasize is that God doesn't beat us up.
Right.
God doesn't hate us.
Yeah.
He's not a bad father.
Right.
Jesus perfectly represents God as this loving father
Right.
that doesn't give us stones when we ask for bread.
Right.
And when we come to God, and Jesus showed us to come to God as our Father, and as he's showing us how to pray and showing us how to come to him, he's showing us a dad. He's even modeling pulling the children up on his lap and saying, don't keep the children from me.
Yeah.
God is not a control freak God. He is not watching our every single tiny move and making sure that we do only exactly every little tiny thing. He loves us just like I love my kids.
And you're describing the difference, because when we say the word king, the difference you're describing is king dictator, king father. Jesus revealed king father.
That's right.
Not king dictator. King dictator becomes a big club to try and shame us and force us against our will into an obedient act that we can't sustain and we're just frustrated. King Father coaches us, forgives us, admonishes us, encourages us, gives joy to us in the transformation process.
And you think about that, you think about what a good father would do.
Yeah.
And not everyone's had a good experience with
Right.
a father, so it's hard to know what that picture really looks like.
Yeah.
But I think when we look around and we see a good dad, it creates a longing. It creates a longing to say, wow, that is exactly what God is like. That's how you should think of Jesus
Yeah.
as our king.
Yeah.
He is the kind of Lord and King that loves us like a father loves his children. When I tell my kids to go play in the backyard and I want you to stay in the backyard, I don't care what game they play. I don't care if they pretend to be robots or they play tag or they kick a ball around. I just want them to stay in the backyard. And if they go out of the backyard, I'm going to take them and I'm going to explain to them why I want them to stay in the backyard.
Yeah.
but
for their good.
because I love them. And I might even spank them if they don't continue to listen to me and
Right.
they just continue to be disobedient. But all of that is because I love them and I just want them to go in the backyard and play.
Right.
But God's like that with us, and most people have this picture of God that he wants our worst, not our best.
Right.
He wants to torture us,
Right.
like
He
beat
wants,
us.
he wants to limit us.
Yeah, like you all have to, if you really follow Jesus, this is one of the reasons why people don't follow Jesus. If you really want to follow Jesus, you're going to have to sell everything and go to Africa
Yeah.
and be a missionary.
Right.
So of course you don't want to find out what he has to say. You don't want to follow somebody that's going to do something terrible to you.
Yeah, well, and you need to make a list of all the things you absolutely don't want to do, and that'll be what the Father wants you to do. And that's not Jesus at all.
People actually believe that.
Right,
They
right,
think
right.
that Jesus is going to only call you to horrible things
Yeah.
and make you let go of things that you really want. And I want you to think about the characters in Scripture that Jesus comes up against. They happily
Yeah.
drop everything.
Zacchaeus.
Yeah.
Actually in the story, it's on the way to dinner. It's not at dinner. On the way to dinner, Zacchaeus is so overjoyed. He says, "I'll pay back everybody I cheated, and I'll pay them back 4 times."
Yeah, it's like throwing money in the air. He's so happy.
Yeah,
And there are also people who come up to Jesus and they run into his lordship and he says, "Go and sell everything you have."
Right.
And they say, and the rich young ruler goes away sad
Right.
because he had a lot of wealth and he didn't want to let go of it. And then there's other times where Jesus comes to people and like the woman at the well, and their money's not part of the equation
At all.
at all. So he's going to treat us all uniquely, just like we treat our children.
Yeah.
We treat our children uniquely.
What's important too is, when you're talking about your backyard experience, is there's a lie out there that tells you it's the greener grasses thing. That real freedom is going to be found outside of the boundaries, when in fact real freedom is only found in the boundaries. The
Right.
boundaries are not limitations, the boundaries are protection.
Absolutely.
And inside there, the kind of relationship and the quality of life that can be found is, we're back in the garden again in a sense. I mean, we're having life, abundant life. But when we come to this king part, I still always, Jim, I always have that picture. I watch this show occasionally, I like it. There's some very interesting interviews on Charlie Rose on PBS.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll sit in a format like this with this black table, and he'll bring in some of the world's finest economists, political figures, media people, scientists. But when you talk about Jesus as king, the reality is that Jesus would sit at that table in any forum under any topic, and by the time he got done, everyone would be amazed. Again, he's not Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's not making it up as he goes. He's not the
Right.
absent-minded professor. He would, whether it be psychology or physics or art or history, he is the king. He is the authority because he is the creator.
Right.
He is God in the flesh. And Jesus in the Gospels, he's not there sharing his opinions. Jesus doesn't have opinions.
Right.
Jesus has truth. What he shares is not an opinion to be accepted or rejected. It's the truth. It's life. It's the way. And that's what he called
Right.
himself.
And he even says, "I came to testify. For this very reason I came into the world, to testify to the truth."
Yeah.
He is the authority on life.
Yeah.
And if he's just the authority of concepts,
Yeah.
then he only can change my inner person.
Yeah.
But what if Jesus is authoritative and can show me what I really need for my daily, actual life? Then my curiosity level for him being king and teacher just goes through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Because without a teacher, there is no student.
Right.
Jesus I have to decide that he's the authority in my life. And as like a father king.
Yeah.
Before I'm going to go to him every time. I love it. My son will struggle with something, and sometimes I'll sit and watch him struggle to do something I could do very simply. And I'm waiting for him just to ask me.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, he'll stop and he'll look at me and he'll be like, "Dad, can you help me?" And it's like, "Absolutely." And I'll just do it in 1 second.
Yeah.
And he looks at me like, "Wow, I wish I would have done that sooner."
Yeah.
Right? And I might even show him, "Here's how you do it." And now he knows how to do it, and he can go on, and I'm nearby,
Yeah.
but there he is on his own. He can do it, and that's how God interacts with
I
us.
think so. Yeah, and what builds that hunger again, for me, what helps me realign so I can build that hunger again, because it makes you hungry. It makes you, it's compelling, is for me, is starting again at him as high priest. Because he's done for me what could not be done by anyone else, what I couldn't have done for myself, and what I desperately needed. There was no hope without that. But then that leads me to being open to hear what the prophet says, even in the areas that I'm still working through. And that's, I appreciate in group, though, I appreciate in relationship as we follow Jesus together. You know things about me, I know things about you, but as Jesus speaks into those, it's also very affirming with others who are following him to go, you know what, that actually, that is what the Lord's saying.
Right.
That
He's
is
saying it to both of us.
Yeah, or you're saying, Bill, yeah, that is something, I've kind of wanted to say that to you, or whatever, but it's Jesus using both his people, his word, his Holy Spirit to transform me, not to instruct me,
Right.
not to skill train me, but to transform me into a new person. And then, of course, that to me leads to the King, that I'm looking forward to being under his reign, that I want to wake up in the morning and say, you are sovereign over my day. You are the only trusted authority in my life.
So practically what that looks like, I mean, you get up in the morning and you believe that Jesus has set you free to have the life
Yes.
that he's called you to, that he has a purpose and a vision for you and your life, and that it's for your good.
Yeah.
You can wake up in Romans 8:1.
Yeah.
There is no condemnation for those who are in
Right.
Christ Jesus. And then you can move into, God's going to guide me and show me what to do with my life, and I need to come to him.
Mm-hmm.
And some things are going to be hard to hear, but I need to hear them to really experience and enjoy taking the territory that I need to take. And then as king, if I don't know what to do, he's going to show me.
Yeah.
And he might even just do it for me.
Yeah.
That's what it's like to know Jesus. And knowing Jesus changes you. Trying harder doesn't.
No.